Hello and welcome to the Craft Beer Corner. For today's beer review, we're jumping yet again into another beer from Elder Pine Brewing and Blending out of Gaithersburg, Maryland. Now, we've had probably 5 or 6 different beers in the last couple of years of Elder Pine, all that I discovered from Tavour. And today we're jumping into the beer style that, for my money, is the ultimate test of a brewer's prowess, because this is a beer style that is the most imitated in the world, but the hardest to make truly great and truly special. And that is, of course, the Pilsner beer style. So today we're jumping into Elder Pine's Royal Pilsner. This one clocks in at 5.3% AB, so it's sitting right in the middle of the average range, maybe on the high middle, but not out of the norm. This one, they did give us the hop bill, and it's Riwaka and Nelson Sauvin. And of course, they also did give us, as they always do, their malt bill on the back. Of course, I still need new glasses, but they use classic Pilsner malt and golden oats. So they're going with a very, very classic Pilsner approach here, just with the exception of using classic German Czech noble hops. They're using Riwaka, I believe those are New Zealand, and Nelson Sauvin. So I'm going to expect kind of some interesting hop characteristics coming through on the aroma and the flavor profile due to using some non-traditional hops in a classic Pilsner. But they've got Pils malt paired with oats. So this ought to do a really nice job forming a classic Pilsner head. And it's really just going to be a test to see what do they do differently than everybody else, how well do they execute it, and what this one's about. So Pilsners are tough. I absolutely love them. It's the most imitated beer style in the world for a reason. Label art on here, it's got a bit more complicated design than I've seen on most of their labels, but it's still relatively plain in the manner that the color scheme and what is actually on there. Nice clean black with the gold foil. So we're going to get this cracked. We are, of course, using our nice Pilsner glass today. Gently, gently, gently. This really shouldn't have a problem forming a head, as is a Pilsner, and they did add oats, so I'm not going to go super aggressive here. I just want to get this straight in the glass without getting any spillage. That's the key. Give it a 45, kind of like you would pour a Guinness. That's honestly the best way. Then slow it down, straight down the middle. We're going to back off, let the head form and settle. Visually, oh, that is classic Pilsner. That very pale, bright yellow, very active in terms of carbonation, crystal clear. This one I see a little mix of really tight, tiny, fine champagne-like bubbles, as well as kind of some medium size. So it's rushing up, forming that nice, thick, lush, creamy Pils head that we all know and love. No problem there. So let's get over this for a full sniff. Oh, wow, yeah. Ooh, that smells really nice. So there are some aromas on here that you wouldn't typically associate with a Pilsner, or maybe one that's at least brewed with classic noble hops. And what I'm getting on here, I'm getting some underlying earthiness, which you don't get on a ton of Pilsners, but I'm also getting slight suggestions of tropical fruit, a little vinous quality, and a little bit of citrus. Now, this could be coming from either of the hops that they chose to use in this, Riwaka or Nelson Sauvin, but a little atypical aroma profile for a Pilsner. So yeah, Elder Pine, I've had a lot of luck with their beers, and this is the first Pilsner I've had from them, and they're already kind of doing their own thing. So I'm going to just jump in and see exactly what their take on a Pilsner is. And the head has already settled down a nice bit. We're sitting at maybe a half an inch. So let's just jump right in, see what this one's about. Oh, yeah. Wow. That's a nice beer. Distinctly a Pilsner, but distinctly going in its own direction. It's going its own way. It's doing its own thing. It's not following the cookie cutter norm, but you know what it is. If you were blindfolded, thrown this in a lineup, I still think that the average person that drinks a fair bit and has enough exposure to the style would still be able to immediately pick this out as a Pilsner. But it does have a deviation from the norm in terms of flavor profile, Obviously it did in the aroma, but it definitely has a little bit of a deviation in the body and mouthfeel as well. Granted, this is kind of on the high end of average, at 5.3. It's not that far off, but this one actually has some real substance to it. Pilsners typically feel quite light. Maybe if it's a little higher ABV than the norm, it might feel in that medium light. I would say this is a strong medium. This beer really has a little bit of moderate weight to it. Not out of the norm for where the ABV range is, to be certain, or certainly for the style, but this one does have presence. It's not a super light, thin beer at all. It doesn't feel that way. In terms of the mouthfeel, this one gets extremely creamy, extremely foamy. It's kind of a combination of silk plus foam, so it kind of expands, but also feels really lush on the palate when you agitate. And this one does a pretty decent job. It's not viscous like an Imperial Stout would be, but it does a pretty good job of coating the palate, and it really lets these interesting flavors kind of settle that are a little bit of a deviation from what you would normally expect in a Pils. So a fair bit to process here. We picked apart the texture and the weight. I'm going to jump back in, get a second sip, let everything re-intensify in my palate. We're going to nitpick and pick out exactly what I'm getting in this flavor profile. We'll address the balance and we'll talk about the finish. But on first sip, yeah, Elder Pine doing it again, doing their own thing, and I really like what they're bringing to the table. So take two. There it is, yeah. It's got this very almost cream ale-like way that it sits on the palate. And it takes about 2-3 seconds before the flavor profile really starts to settle and start, okay, yeah, we're dealing with a Pilsner here. We're not dealing with the Golden Ale. We're not dealing with the Blonde Ale. We're not dealing with a Cream Ale. We're dealing with the Pilsner. And it's got this underlying heart to it that screams Pilsner. On this one, it's got this underlying classic kind of grassy and herbal-like quality that is so common in a Pilsner. And I just have to presume this is coming straight from that Pils malt. Just as this nice creaminess is probably coming from the oat edition, which is a really nice call. In terms of other underlying flavor profiles, this one maybe has a little bit of underlying earthy bitterness forward, a bit more than your average Pils, but again, we're dealing with a higher ABV. Doesn't necessarily mean that the various hop characteristics are going to be a bit more bold, pungent in your face, but it's definitely the case here. But there's also some subtle underlying flavors that you don't normally find in a Pilsner. And there's this lingering slight suggestion of orange rind. So there is definitely some citrus quality coming out. And there is this little back of slight funkiness to this one. There's a little bit of funk and a fair bit of kind of very yeasty quality. You can sometimes find that in a Pils, though it's not quite as common. But all put together, it's really nice. I wasn't sure what the choice of Riwaka and Nelson Sauvin hops would do, and it certainly took a couple seconds to settle in, okay, yeah, that's a Pils. But it's very much just like I have come to expect from Elder Pine, kind of their own take on what they're doing with X. And in this case, a Pilsner, and I absolutely love it. So let's talk about the balance. The balance for me on here, a Pilsner in general should have a little bit of a hop bite. It shouldn't be super aggressive. Some are more than others. My favorite Pilsner is one of the more aggressives. That's Bitburger out of Germany. This one is not quite as aggressively bitter, but the hops that they use certainly brought a ton of hop aroma and flavor character. But yeah, it does still have a little bit of a bite up front. I would guess, at least to my perception, it's a pretty quick bite, then relatively quick away, maybe in the 15 to 20 range. It's not over the top. This is not an IPA. It's not supposed to be. But it's got a bite. They'll let you know, yep, here's some hops. You could already smell them. You could taste them. But yeah, there is a little bit of the underlying bitters that come through. And in terms of how that balances out with a malt bill, it's very, very nice. Classic Pils malt. That's what's kind of the backbone of this one. The oats giving this nice creamy lush effect and certainly aids in the head that it formed nice and creamy. But there's nothing too much deviating. Kind of the big story about this one is the different hops that they use, and there's aromatic and flavor compounds that they bring to the table you would not normally find in your average Pilsner that are here. So yeah, it's very distinctly, clearly still a Pilsner, but it does take a little work to pick it out. You would have to have a decent bit of exposure to maybe say blindfolded, yep, that's a Pils. But when you do, it's very nice. And the differences that it brings to the table are also very nice. So I love a classic noble hop Pils, but this combination of hops works extremely well in this beer style for my money. So the finish on this. Pilsners can often have a little bit of a drying effect on the end. This is no different. It does have. And this one is very much what is the norm on Pilses that are kind of crisp and drying. It's right on the tip of the tongue. It's not on the back. It's not on the middle of the palate. It doesn't dry out the whole mouth. It's just like right on the tip of the tongue. That's where I'm getting a little bit of it. It's very subtle, but it's that classic Pils, what gives it that crispness to the finish. It doesn't have big, bold, lingering flavors, which is very typical and average for the style. I would say that's mostly average. There's not big, bold, intense hops driving it out. And it's just a classic Pils, just with a slight tweak on the recipe with these hops. I really think this is great. I love a good Pilsner. I would say this is a great Pilsner. So I'm going to take my time, really pick this one apart, come up with my scores. And when we come back, we will get this beer ranked from top to bottom. All right, now that we've gotten to enjoy this beer, we're going to get it ranked. This was Elder Pine Brewing and Blending's Royal Pilsner, clocking in at 5.3% ABV. Elder Pine is based in Gaithersburg, Maryland, and this was a deviation from the standard recipe in that they threw in some non-traditional hops, specifically Riwaka and Nelson Sauvin. So this beer did extremely well. What a great twist on a classic Pils. They didn't go with the classic Czech or German noble hop route, but kept the base of it the same and just went in a different direction to do their own thing with some new hops. And it made for a very nice, distinctly Pilsner, but different Pilsner drinking experience. I really liked it. It broke the monotony of what's already a great style, but you know, you drink the same thing over and over with basically the same formula. It's nice to see an approach that, you know, is in a different direction. And I think it really worked well in this beer. So only a couple of categories that did not get a perfect score. So we will jump straight to those. The first of those was in the aroma. Now the aroma on this beer was very, very nice. Pilsners aren't a style that's known for a massively pungent aroma. Indeed, this one was more pungent than your average. And I think it came down to kind of a combination of just overall hop intensity. Maybe they did a little additional dry hopping, but the hops really jumped out of the glass. And you could really pick up this distinctly separate notes that they brought to the table compared to a standard Pilsner. Very distinct aroma coming out of that hop selection and much larger than average pungency. The aroma did get a 9 out of 10. It only missed a perfect score by just a thin margin. The second category that did not get a perfect score was in the finish. And really, this was just kind of average. You know, it wasn't bad. It wasn't outside of the scope of normalcy, but it wasn't quite what I expected, especially considering the overall intensity and pungency from the hops. You know, a Pilsner is not a style known for a super long finish, but just based on the character I got out of what they did with this beer, I did expect it to drive out a little longer, just owing to the interesting hop selection pungency, but really, it was just average. It was just normal. Nothing bad, nothing out of the norm here. So the finish did get an average rating of 5 out of 10, but it did get a perfect 10 out of 10, of course, in all remaining 8 categories, and that's in taste, body, mouthfeel, head and retention, appearance, balance, feeling and tangible, my subjective thoughts category, and example of style, which does bring the total score on Elder Pine Brewing and Blending's Royal Pilsner to a 94 out of 100. I mean, this was just awesome. If you're a fan of Pilsners, this is one that is absolutely worth the hunt. I got mine from Tavour. I'm hoping that they bring this in the rotation because this is one I'd like to grab again. This was a really, really nice Pilsner, an excellent and interesting twist on a classic style that was still a true Pilsner at its heart, but just gave you some more interesting layers outside of the normal expectation. And it really all did come down to me to their hop selection, Riwaka and Nelson Sauvin. That's obviously not related at all to the classic noble hops, and it really did make a completely different character in a beer that was still very distinctly a Pilsner. I absolutely loved it. It was super crisp, super refreshing, and I liked this interesting new twist on this classic style. Folks, that's today's review. As always, I do sincerely appreciate you tuning in today. Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. If you want to stay in the loop when our videos go live, just turn on your notifications, hit the bell icon. It is right next to the subscribe button. Until next time, keep it beer, keep it craft. We'll see you on the next one. Cheers.